Hey guys, it's Stanton, and you're listening to the One Audacious Move podcast. And right now, I don't care if you're folding laundry, driving to work, hanging out with the kids, or just scrolling to kill time. You need to hear this. I just finished up an incredible conversation with our next guest. If you've ever sat in a job you don't love, felt like your passions faded, or wondered if it's too late to become the person you know you're supposed to be, this episode's for you. Today, we're joined by Hannah Miller. She's not some viral success story or celebrity guest. She's actually something more powerful, a real human being who's been through some real suffering. A woman who's worked a full-time finance job while walking through addiction and recovery with her husband, all while still pursuing her passion of writing. Hannah's faced days that would level most people, but somehow, in the middle of all of that, she still kept chasing the things that light her up inside. And the joy she carries even through this conversation inspires the heck out of me to see the positive in the suffering. Whether it's writing, life coaching, or speaking, she's pushed through in spite of life's difficulties. Not once life got easy, but while it was still hard. So this conversation with Hannah isn't polished. It's not a highlight reel. It's raw, honest, and deeply needed, especially if you're in a season where life feels small and mundane, or overwhelming, or like you missed your window. Because what Hannah's story reminds us of is this: the life you want doesn't come after the storm. It gets built right in the middle of it. And if you're waiting for permission, waiting for clarity, waiting for the right time, well, this episode is your sign. So seriously, don't just listen casually. Lock in on this episode. It could change the way that you see your pain, your purpose, and your future. Let's go ahead and dive in with Hannah. All right, Hannah, welcome to One Audacious Move.
Thank you for having me.
Really stoked that you're here. Really excited to be shifting the format of this podcast. I recently told some of the guests that it was going to be less of just me on this podcast and inviting more people onto the podcast that are doing audacious things in their life, have done audacious things in their life, are humans that are struggling through the whole idea of just going through life and the ups and downs of creativity and balancing passion with life and stuff. And honestly, that's a big reason that I wanted you to come on too, because you are someone that has a normal job. You have a 9 to 5. You work from home, not to steal your thunder. Kind of go into that, but you have all these things, but you also are deeply creative, deeply passionate for things outside of what your 9 to 5 calls you to. And so I'm really excited to dive into this with you today, because I feel like so many people are in the situation of working a normal job. And by normal job, meaning they're not an entrepreneur, they're not kind of making their own schedule, and sometimes feel like they can't go out and do the things that they want to do in their life, that their work defines and restricts what they do. And then sometimes it can even tip over to the point where people are using that as an excuse for, well, you know, I work a 9 to 5. I didn't start 10 years ago like you did whenever you started, Cody. So, you know, obviously I can't do this now because I'm in my 30s or I'm in my late 20s. It might be too late for me. I have a family to take care of or something. So I feel like from what my wife has told me about you, from our conversations, and just from doing a little bit of research into you, that you do a really good job of balancing those. And so I guess just want to start with that. How, Hannah, do you balance your 9 to 5 where you're locked in, having to focus on one thing for a good 50% of your waking hours, but also go and do other creative things? And what are those creative things that you're drawn to?
Yeah, this is definitely something I've processed over the years. It's not something that I woke up one day and was like, I got balance, you know?
Yeah.
And I struggled a long time with this thought of like, I hate having this 9 to 5 and I want to be doing this as my full-time job. And I see people who I respect so much, like, and their passion is their job. And it would almost like cause me to compare myself. So I understand that struggle very well. But a friend once told me, he said, like, it's okay to have a 9 to 5 that supports the passion, that supports the dream, you know, and you can't give up on that love just because you feel kind of bottlenecked by your 9 to 5. And for me, how I balance the two is finding inspiration in the mundane and allowing myself to, as a writer especially, so there's other creative outlets, right? But as a writer, I'll be like triggered by something that inspires me. Like I'll be on the phone with a client and they'll say something. For instance, this lady I was talking to last week was talking about like self-image on the phone in regards to something else. And I was like, after I hung up, it just triggered me. And I pulled out my notes pad and I started writing something based off of what she said. Or I'll go hiking and nature inspires me a ton. Being with my friends inspires me a ton. Being with people. I've always been so fascinated by people's stories. since I was little. And so finding joy and inspiration in the mundane has been a huge way for me to stop seeing life as like job and passion. It's like the two can coexist.
100%.
And so I think allowing them to naturally merge and feed off of each other almost has been an avenue for me.
Yeah, 100%. Something obviously that stuck out to me in you saying that I feel like a lot of people miss in life is the mundane side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're not missing out on it because so many people, that's all that they can focus on is how mundane their life is. But it's the lens through which they're looking at it through. Can you speak a little bit more into that, finding beauty in the mundane?
Yeah. It's something that this is also very a natural inclination for me. Like I've always been a feeler. I could see someone at the grocery store and be like moved by something, you know. So I'm like, I am a feeler in my nature, but just not passing through life and just like going through life because that's what you do every day, or you drive by this thing every day, or you talk to that person every day. But truly, like, what does God want you to see in this moment? Or like, I believe that we're in every moment for a reason, and there is something to be learned. So for instance, like I'll give you an example of like finding joy in the mundane. A couple years ago, I had a job in office every day, 9 to 5. And I would pass by this homeless man every single day. And I would just pass him, whatever, like, but I was always struck by him. And then one day I went and got Chick-fil-A and I sat down with him and we would eat lunch for like a couple days in a row. And I wrote a long story about him and he inspired me a ton. So like things like that, like you just don't know where you're going to pull inspiration from.
100%. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Exquisite Risk. The exquisite risk being, and I haven't read the whole book, but I've read the back of the book.
Yeah.
So I'm on chapter 1. The exquisite risk being putting down your guardrails on life, putting down the lens through which you look at life through, and opening up yourself to honestly the mundane things in life. The author of this book, he describes, and it's actually kind of frustrating for me because the lens through which he's looked at life has always been this way. And for me, it hasn't always been that way. He references his childhood and he talks about falling and scraping his knee on the ground. And it was some blood in the dirt when he was a kid. And he saw the ground and he saw his blood. And he had this like epiphany of sorts of just like how human he was. And he put his ear to the ground and he said that he could, quote, hear warmth. And then he said he was out in the sea a few years later and he was by himself for the first time, and that he felt like he felt God there. He felt like he felt creative inspiration there. He felt like he truly was there in the moment, present, fully alive. And he has all these little stories that he tells within it as he kind of starts to paint this picture of being present, living a full life, focusing on the mundane and the beauty that actually is lying in every moment around us. But sometimes it can be frustrating for me because he describes it as something that he grew up with. And obviously he's writing a book to bring you into that world. That's this guy's passion. But it can be frustrating sometimes whenever you don't know how to slow down and focus on the mundane, to notice the homeless guy on the corner. And not saying that, I mean, depending on where you live, if you stopped for every homeless person you saw, like you'd be broke pretty quick too, you know what I mean? But like finding inspiration in being out on the sea by yourself and sitting in your living room looking at your dog and being like, wow, there's this beautiful life in front of me. And we'll get back to the 9 to 5 thing here in a second, but I just want to go down this rabbit hole just a little bit further. Would you have any advice as someone, well, I guess A, have you always been like that? And B, if you could help bridge the gap for someone that doesn't know how to do that, that focuses on the mundane as annoying or as boring or as just something, you know, when people think about alignment and creative pursuit or inspiration, fulfillment, peace, all these kinds of things, it almost seems like it's this out of reach thing that you claw for and you work for your entire life. That's just going to all of a sudden one day in your life be like, I'm what you should be doing with your life. And here I am finally, like an angel appearing in your room or something like that. But what I'm learning, and not that I've necessarily found that, is that it is in those moments, life is kind of relinquishing the fact that it's not going to be this big angel screaming in your window saying, hey, you know, this is your purpose. It's it is the tiny moments that are presenting themselves through you, to you every moment of every day.
Yeah.
And I'm really bad at focusing on those. And so honestly, not just for the viewers, but for myself, how would you recommend slowing down to like focus on the mundane and getting creative inspiration from that? But also, has that been a part of you forever?
Yes and no. So yes, I have always been deeply in tune with things. And I have my husband and I joke, I have a steel trap memory. So I have like memories from when I was a child that still like inspire me, which is another story for another day. But have I had to learn that? Yes. I am an Enneagram 3. For those of you that don't know, that's the achiever.
Let's go. I'm an 8.
So I often would mark life by I'm doing it, I'm making it. Like I've achieved this, cross it off the list, you know?
Yeah.
Even as a little kid, like if I didn't make honor roll, it would crush me. So I get that aspect of life, but I'd say especially going through hardship in the last few years, God has just like ripped that out of me. I'm like, am I still an Enneagram 3?
Yeah.
To retake the test. But just going through hardship, like you cannot control it. It's out of your control. And so I've just been so challenged the last couple of years to just be like, as hard as that sounds, exist in the moment you're in. You're not in the past. You're not in the future. And if you're focused on the past and you're focused on the future, you're going to crap on the present, essentially, you know? And so learning to be in the moments I'm in with people, with my pets even, you know, or even in my job, like that has deeply challenged me to see the mundane differently because I'm not promised tomorrow, you know? And how do I make the most of the moment I'm in today? Like, how do I want to be remembered today in this moment? And so even that perspective shift, just going through life has really challenged me.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit more on why the hardship affected you to appreciate the moment more? You spoke on it briefly, but I just wanted to dive into that a little bit more because that seems like maybe that was the linchpin of making, you said you were kind of like that when you were a kid, but that really tore down the walls to really help you start appreciating these moments more.
Yeah. I'm a planner through and through. I mean, even when I graduated, I would have like, I'm going to do this in 2018. I'm going to do this in 2009. I had like, you know, this is what's going to happen. None of that list has happened. It's okay though, you know?
I feel that.
I like to, I don't want to say control situations, but I like to know that I kind of can gauge the room. Like I have not the upper hand, but essentially like I know what's going on in every moment. And we'll get into this, right? But through my husband's, he's in recovery, and through his addiction and relapses and stuff, life is not in control when that is happening. For anyone who's struggled with that, you know, life is very much out of control. And so just chipping away that part of me that wants to control the moment or know what's going to happen next, you don't. And so appreciating the current moment, that's definitely where that came from. And then also with addiction and with my husband's addiction, there's times I'm like, you may not survive like this moment. You may not, like I genuinely, that thought is running through my brain. And so that has changed me a ton. Like currently now, just being so appreciative of the moment I'm in. Like we went hiking this weekend and, you know, he's in front of me and I'm behind. And I was just thinking to myself, like, God, like a year ago, I didn't know this would be a moment that I would have, you know? And just being so thankful that a year ago I couldn't see today, but it gets better than I imagined. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So getting back to the 9 to 5, and we'll come back to that, but I just wanted to dive a little bit further into the why behind it. And I guess before going back to 9 to 5, I'll ask you one more question. There's I don't even know, like a Buddhist quote or something like that basically says suffering is grace. Would you agree with that quote, that suffering is grace? And I think the broader meaning of that is that through suffering, it is the whole idea of trial by fire, that you become a more full version of yourself. That experiences the beauty, the grace that you now have is that you appreciate the hike. You appreciate life so much more. Would you agree with that sentiment?
100%. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to suffer. Nobody's like, yay, you know, but I would say it has revolutionized my thinking, my life. It empties you of yourself, to where maybe someone I might have judged before or someone I might have looked at differently before. It's like, I don't see you that way. I see you through eyes of grace, really. Like, if I can go through that season, or if I have lived through that season, like, who am I to judge? Who am I to see people, through maybe a negative lens? So it definitely, it shapes you, it refines you, it chips off all the things that shouldn't
For sure. Yeah, it makes sense. So I have a thing that sometimes is a blessing and curse for me is I have a very logical approach to these deep emotional, spiritual things that we're talking about. And I try to dissect it in my own mind to figure out how to achieve what you're talking about, to be able to balance the 9 to 5 with the creative pursuit. And so going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, the creative pursuit is balanced by inspiration from the mundane. And you've learned to you've learned to find creative inspiration in the mundane because of all the stuff that life has been throwing at you recently. And so I guess, what would you say to somebody that maybe, like, I guess even thinking about myself, like where I'm at in life, there's a lot of stress for different reasons that I'm having right now, switching out of my past field of being a wedding videographer and an educator and all of that, moving into doing podcasts, doing things with the alignment experience, other things that are drawing me in life, but it's really stressful.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can be, you're in the middle of something and you're like, well, screw suffering is grace. This sucks. You know what I mean? Like, you can only say that after the fact. Sometimes it's really hard. I mean, you have to be a really grounded person to be sitting there with your water heater not working, with bills to pay, with a kid crying, with all these different things, and be like, thank you, God. This is amazing. Like, life, I can't wait for all the lessons I'm going to learn from this. Like, you got to be like really, really grounded to do that. And so, I guess I just like to connect it logically for people of, where if somebody is maybe in that, because you can speak to, maybe if you can track yourself back, float back to that time when you were in the middle of that, what would you say to somebody that's in the middle of the suffering, maybe an analogous thing to what you're going through, or maybe completely differently, that would help them get through that?
Specifically the suffering piece, right? I remember I would say this to myself so much, like 1,000 times a day. I'd be crying on my floor, like, to be real with you. And I would just say to myself, it's not always going to be this way. Like, I just kept saying that to myself. It's not always going to be this way. Like, this is not forever. This season is not forever. There's going to come a day when we look back on this and we're going to be celebrating, or whatever happens, bad or good. Eventually, we have to come out the other side of this thing. Whether it's very sad for me or it's not, like, we're going to make it through, and I will deal with whatever happens on the other side. So if you're in the middle of suffering right now, I would tell you, like, you have to almost preach to yourself, like, it's not always going to be this way. We're going to make it through. If you have to imagine the worst, okay, if the worst happens, you're still alive, you got air in your lungs, we're still going to make it through. So almost like coaching yourself. And then if you're dealing with stress, a grounding technique for me is catching myself. Like, when you're in the middle of suffering, it's easy to be like, okay, God's got me, or like, whatever, we reach out for God when life's hard. But even recently, like, life's going better for me now, a lot better. And I'll catch myself being like, okay, Hannah, you're slipping. Like, you're getting a little, not hot-headed, but you're getting forgetful of what you've been brought through. So in those moments, I will, like, catch myself and be like, okay, grounded. Like, you need to come back down. Like, God's brought you through so much. Like, be thankful, like, just coaching yourself, being in tune with where your head's at has been a huge thing for me. And that's learned, I think.
Yeah. I'm learning the power of mantras lately. And that has been because I've started running lately. And it's like these little things that you tell yourself that just one more, or, keep pushing or whatever. Like, you have grit, keep going.
Yep.
Little things that I wrote on my notes that I looked at mile 20 into a marathon, and it helped me get through. And it's crazy how much those little things can help, having little things that you tell yourself.
Yep.
Because when you are in the middle of the stress, when you are in the middle of the suffering, when you are in the valley, sometimes you don't have the bandwidth to realize you're in the valley and that it is a valley. Well, you know you're in the valley, but that it is a valley, and that if you are on a journey, which is life, you will exit if you continue forward. And that's the important thing to remember. And that's really encouraging for me with certain areas of my life too, of realizing that the stress, the suffering, whatever it might be, this is a season. And I have a North Star of inspiration and creativity and purpose here on earth that is keeping me alive, is helping me to continue on this journey of life that makes it worth suffering. Yeah.
Something you said, we're in the valley, right? In that same sentiment, that thought would come to my brain as well in the middle of suffering. And I would say to myself, like, okay, we're going through the valley, but we're not going to camp in the valley. And I think a lot of times people camp in the valley, whether that's they're in the suffering, and obviously, right, emotions are valid, but sometimes we almost have self-pity, or I'm stuck here. This is how it is. Like, you don't understand. Like, I can't get up. I can't go. And I've been there. And I've also been challenged by people too, in my own conviction, right? Of like, no, like, no matter how crappy I feel, like, I still have to get up. And if it's one step in today, we got to still move out of the valley, you know, and just not letting yourself get stuck in that negative mindset where you can't even, trudge out a little bit.
Yeah. It's almost like a recognition. How do I word this? It's almost like a mental recognition, even if you are in the valley, even if you feel like camping out, that there's maybe this dissonance that goes on in your head of seeing your situation, but not being okay with it. Like, you're still suffering to the same degree.
Yeah.
And you still want to camp out and be like, woe is me. This sucks. I don't know if I'm going to get out of this, but maybe, and I've experienced this too, sometimes the thing that helps me feel like, hey, I know I'm going to get out of this is just the fact that I'm not okay with it. Just the fact that I'm not okay with camping out, with how I feel. Like, sometimes I will run. Like last week, I talked about running to the couch and scrolling on my phone because I was so stressed about things, but I'm not okay with it. It's like it's a torturous comfort that sometimes we force ourselves into. Doom scrolling, if somebody listened to this last week, I'm going to kind of beat a dead horse here. Doom scrolling is a toxic thing that feels good in this like little fleeting moment, but this overall sense while we're sitting down on the couch, during it, and after is I'm wasting my time.
100%.
Typically, if you're not camping out in that season. And so eventually I will get off the couch and I'll go do something, and everybody ends up eventually getting off the couch. But the point is that like that dissonance is important to help not camp out. And I guess I just, as a word of hope to people that might be struggling and wanting to get out and do creative things, is that like, if you aren't okay with it, but you're still in it, hold on to that at least. That you're not.
Indicator, that like something still is in you, that there's like even if the house is burned down, there's still a little remnant that's like, we can rebuild off this remnant.
Yeah. Well, thanks for diving into that.
Yeah.
I'll kind of maybe circle back to it, but back to the 9 to 5, because I am excited to kind of dive more into that paradigm, that balance. You are currently balancing a finance job with other creative pursuits and just being, a normal person in this world and having friends and stuff. The hardships over the last few years that have affected you, that hasn't just been the stint of what has drawn you to writing. You've had creative expression through speaking, through writing, through drawing people in with 3 a.m. conversations. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But, before that, you also had a balance with the 9 to 5 as well, before your husband's relapse, before all of that stuff. How were you finding yourself before maybe the suffering that taught you to find beauty in the inspiration, or to find beauty in the mundane, before all of that hard stuff happened? I don't know your life very well before that, but how were you balancing that before, or were you balancing that before?
Yeah. So my artistic avenue is writing, speaking, and that has always been deeply embedded in me. Like, it's something that if I'm not doing, I feel a depletion. Even if I try to ignore it, or like, whatever, you're too busy, like, we got work to do. If I'm not functioning in that, eventually I'm going to feel depressed, anxious, like, because I'm not functioning in my gifting. So I've known that is a part of me. And so before, even I met Justin, that's my husband, as a kid, as a teenager, as a college student, writing was always an avenue for me. It was always an outlet. I have journals from when I was a little kid that I'll sometimes look back on and cringe. But it's just been a part of me. And so whether it was writing for myself, writing for somebody else, writing for a college essay, like I have to do it. You know, I love it so much. It's a part of me. So I think that's kind of how I've always intertwined it in my life. From a practical standpoint, nowadays I will spend at least a couple hours a week. I would like to do an hour a day, but I try to spend a couple hours a week just opening the Google Doc and writing something. Even if I have to stare at the screen for a few hours, I make this appointment with myself that even if nothing happens, I'm going to show up and I'm going to give my best effort to write something because that's what I'm passionate about. And if nothing happens, awesome. But at least we met the goal of, you know, coming to the table and meeting our passion, you know?
How do you get yourself to do that after work or before work? How are you getting yourself to, for a few hours a week, which comes up to probably 15 to 30 minutes, maybe per day if you ended up doing that, or maybe 45 minutes every other day, or however much it ends up being. How are you doing that with a husband, with friends, with groceries and all these other things that you got to go do that are part of life that can take you away from feeling like you have time or literally having time to do that?
Working from home is a benefit, I would say, for sure. Like I'm not in an office with people chatting at me and stuff. And so Justin leaves for work, and just practically he leaves for work and I sit in front of my computer and I try to, like the hour or two before actually I start my day job, I will try to read or write or pray or whatever is inspiring to me in that moment. That's kind of my time in the morning. I used to be a night owl, but you know, you get married, you just don't have that luxury anymore.
Right.
But as a morning person now, that is my time, like that little morning window before I doom scroll, before I'm inundated with work. Lisa, actually, your wife, told me to download Opal, which is this app, shout out, that will block you out of your social medias. Yeah. And so that's been huge for me because I can linger toward Instagram or TikTok. And so having that, like, nope, you're going to focus on this today.
100%. Yeah, I have a thing called Brick, and it's this physical device that's actually over on my refrigerator. And have you heard of Brick?
No.
It's just an app on your phone, and you walk up to wherever you have your brick physically placed in the house, and you tap your phone on it. And it does the same thing as Opal, except you can't. Opal? Is that the name of it?
I think it is.
Yeah. It does the same thing, but in order to actually access the apps, you have to go back to that physical place, tap your phone on it to open them back up. So, I mean, you could lock your phone for a whole evening as you go out with friends, or if you're going to a concert, or if you need to go to a coffee shop and study or practice or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And you can't get on Instagram. They have like 3 emergency unbricks, but after that, like you have to come back and tap it on.
Yeah.
So, and before those days, I remember when I first started going back to talking about being present and just being, I had as this screensaver on my phone, probably like an iPhone 4 or whatever it was back then, iPhone 3. But I had a screensaver that said B in lowercase, BE period. And that was like the precursor to the apps that were blocking, precursor to the inundation of social media and the doom scrolling and Reels and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. But even then, I remember back in 2011, 2012, whenever I was in college, there still was the draw to the noise, to the distraction, those kinds of things. And so you're finding yourself in the morning free from those distractions.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know your chronotype?
My what type?
Your chronotype?
I don't. What is that?
It's I don't even actually know how to describe it, but it kind of defines, and I did a quick chat GPT.
Yeah.
I just said to chat, I was like, hey, help me figure out what my chronotype is. Give me like 5 multiple choice questions. Make it super basic. Because if you go online and take any test, it's like you go through the whole test and then it's like, give me your email, your name, your phone number. And it's like,
your life.
I'm not doing all that. Yeah. So I'm like, I want to know what it is. But basically it's like, it helps you figure out based on your chronotype, I guess. I don't even know the word. I'm butchering this analogies of it. It helps you figure out when you're most productive, when your energy is best utilized.
Okay.
So apparently I'm the bear, and that's kind of this. I'm not a morning person. I'm not a night owl, but my like mid-morning before lunch, before I eat lunch and have this 3 p.m. slump, which inevitably happens if I put a peanut inside of me. Like I get a 3 p.m. slump. I could drink water, I think, and like still feel tired at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
But it helps you figure out like your best windows. And so I've been talking to a lot of my friends and people about like whenever it comes to productivity and efficiency, which is in direct correlation to doing the things that fulfill you. You know, you have to be kind of in a productive mindset to push through when you're tired, when you get up in the morning before you go to work, or when you're tired and you just worked 8 or 9 hours or 10 hours and you come home and you have a husband or you have a wife and you want to spend time with them and then you're tired. And how are you going to spend time before you go to bed? Well, you have to be in a productive mindset. And so realizing where you need to target those things, I think, is really important. And so I guess you would probably be, well, I don't know what the one would be, an early bird.
Yeah, it's like I would have said it would have been like midnight. That used to be my time.
Same.
And then obviously I got married and I'm like, okay, well, we got to shift this. And it took me a while to get into that morning routine. Like I'm not very inspired in the morning, you know, but as I've practiced this, right, and that's what I learned as you get older, you almost just have to learn how to like practice things, implement them, and eventually they'll become more of a rhythm and a flow. And so that has been a rhythm that has developed over the last year or so.
100%.
Yeah.
You said that writing and speaking, I don't know if you said it for both of them, but you said for sure writing has been something that's been with you for a long time, ever since you can remember. Not to misquote you, you might have said something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How you know that it's been with you that long?
Yeah, just something I've always been drawn to words, the power of words, the power of a sentence. I just think they're so powerful, right? You hear someone say something to you and it just sticks with you for life. Like I have things that I can remember said to me or written to me as a young child, you know, that still either propel me or, you know, dampened me in some ways. And so just the power of words I've always been drawn to. And then kind of digging that out of myself. In my young teens, I really loved poetry and writing poems, and I'd write poems that rhymed and then read them to my mom, and you know, she's my best fan. But I loved that avenue. And so as a kid, if you would ask me what I want to be when I grow up, I'd always say I want to be Oprah, because I loved telling stories. I loved writing, and she had this magazine, all the things, you know. And so even as a young kid, like that's always been a dream of mine and just a passion of mine. Yeah.
I think it's really cool that, I guess the word I would use for it is, it's really cool that you've been able to notice that about yourself, because we all have something like that.
Yeah.
Whether we realize it or not. And that for the people listening, you know, they might be listening to you and be like, that's so cool that Hannah has always known. She's always been drawn to words.
Yeah.
You know, it was like the first thing you said. But for other people, you know, for some people, it might be frustrating because they just don't feel like they have any inclination toward anything. Sometimes life can feel really blah, and then they look at the mundane as boring. You know, as I keep going back to the mundane because it really is, whenever life is not loud, that is where the beauty of what we're created to do, why we're here on earth, unfolds. Whenever we listen and we look back at the life that's laid out, there's clues all throughout our childhood, all throughout our teenage years, college, the life that you've lived. There have been little things that have happened. And it's been interesting because a quick story that, and the reason that I wanted to have you on is because I've also found myself just recently in the last year start to enjoy writing. And that wasn't something that I ever really picked up on from like the age of probably 10 until 32.
Wow.
And so that's what, 22 years of this sleeping dream, this sleeping maybe talent, this sleeping thing that gets me excited. And so I guess that begs the question, and I'll just tell a quick story here too, of, you know, why did it become buried? You know, and then how did I start to notice it again? But the reason I believe that it started to become buried is because when I was in 5th grade, whatever age that is, I started writing a book. And the book was on Lord of the Rings. It was like a deviation of Lord of the Rings. I was a little geek about Lord of the Rings. So it was the first like action movie I was ever able to watch. And I started writing a book, and it was about this orc that used to be, and okay, this sounds so nerdy, but like all orcs, like the goblin things in Lord of the Rings, used to be elves apparently in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yep.
And so I started writing this book about how this elf became an orc, but how he became good again over time as he remembered more of who he was in the past. It was like, I look back on that after, kind of realizing that I enjoyed writing through therapy. My therapist asking me like, why are you enjoying writing so much? Why do you enjoy the YouTube scripting side of things more than actually recording it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a really good question. And he's like, when was the first time you enjoyed writing? At 32 years old, I sit there and I realized that I started writing a book at 5th grade, which apparently, and my therapist also, he's a writer too. And he's like, do you know how rare that is to start writing a book in 5th grade? But I got a couple chapters in and I went and showed it to one of my parents. And again, it's about an orc. And so orcs are like live in these like grungy, bad places.
Yeah.
And like the elves are tortured to become orcs or whatever. So I'm writing about this, and my parents, very conservative Christian people, say to their 5th grade son that's writing this kind of like more or less just like horror book in a way. From their perspective, they're like, it seems a little dark, Cody. And that's the only phrase I remember them saying. And I never picked up anything to write again. And I look back on that as I was kind of uncovering that during therapy, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah.
They probably also said it was really good writing, and too, but what stuck with me, and again, my parents were great parents.
Yeah.
They spoke so much truth and power into me and pushed me to do whatever I wanted in life. And, I'm scared to do the same thing one day. I'm going to mess up and bury one of my kids' dreams accidentally. But it's interesting how that one thing just kind of like derailed all of that. And I started discovering that here at 32 years old. How all of that to say, and that was something that if I didn't keep doing the guest format, I was going to talk about on this next episode anyway. Was that? But how do you, if you're not going to therapy and analyzing all of your actions and having somebody ask why about every single thing that you go through, which is kind of what a therapist does. They don't like answer things; they point it back to you.
Dig it out,
they dig it out. How do you start to notice those things in your life? And maybe that's a hard question to ask you because it has been something that you've noticed that has always been with you. But what would your advice be to somebody to start noticing the little things that they're doing that might seem mundane, but there's actually their superpower buried underneath there? Because our superpower is normal to us.
Absolutely,
it's normal because we've always been doing it. But to somebody else, it's a superpower. It's something that we're really good at.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna take it back to a story. So I was always very shy and insecure. Like, okay, I wouldn't say always. I was around the age of like 10, 11, like, that prime age.
Yes.
I just, through, whatever, bullying or just hearing people say things or, poo-poo on your ideas, it just kind of dampens you and you just stop sharing, and it's like, why do we do that? I don't know. But I just developed this insecurity and shyness, and to the point where I almost didn't want to go to college because I'm like, I'm not about to give presentations in front of, bunch of college kids. Like, just that fear was so rooted in me. And so I took a year off of college and I did this church internship, and this pastor guy there, he asked me, he's like, hey, will you give this Devo in front of like 60 volunteers? I was like, oh no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'd much rather not do that. But I did it. And I remember after I was done, he was like, hey, he pulled me aside. And this is someone I deeply respect. And he doesn't give out compliments much, but he was like, there's a gift in you. Like, there's something to this. And I remember just hearing him say that. I was like, oh, like, you see something in me, And then as I went into college, professors, I started to gain confidence in it, right? People saw it in me. I started to gain confidence in it. Professors were noticing it, saying things to me. I'd get feedback from people that was like, hey, I think this is something you should pursue. Like, you're gifted in this, writing, speaking. Like, okay. And I started to believe it for myself. And I think just that belief in myself of, okay, like, this is something that is not by accident. Like, this is something God gave you, it's a gift. And so kind of going back to your question, like, what do people see in you? What have people noticed about you? What do they call out? Like, hey, you're really good at X, Y, and Z. It may not even be a talent. It may be a character trait. And then go dive into that. Like, this character trait about me, like justice, maybe. Okay, what do I do with this? Like, I care about right and wrong, or I care about people, or what is it that you see a need? And then how does your talent, how does your person fill that in some degree?
Yeah, I've heard that's really good. And I've heard a similar thing of ask your friends, kind of more or less what your superpower is. Ask them, like, if you needed something from me, what would you be calling me for? Like,
That's great.
what is the thing that when you think of me that I can help you with or that I'm good at, and that's kind of a vulnerable, weird question to text somebody with or just drop on somebody in a call, but it can really be insightful with you figuring out what your calling is in life. That is like the biggest puzzle piece that so many people suffer through life, whether they know it or not, that torturous comfort that we talk about. The reason that the doom scrolling is torturously comfortable is because we know we should be doing something else. If they're like you, maybe you should be writing. Maybe you know that you should be going off and doing these things. But if they're not like you, and maybe they haven't known or they haven't had the person speaking to them and say you have a gift, there's just this thing in you that is emotionally dissonant with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so the puzzle piece is like figuring out what is the thing that you should be doing. And so that, that's why we're talking about this.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, I believe, of One Audacious Move is, yes, it's about taking the bold risk. But what are you taking the bold risk for? You know what I mean? And it's interesting, too, that you said that about this pastor walking up to you and saying that you had a gift, because we kind of have similar analogous. I enjoy speaking, not to say I'm good at it, but I enjoy it. And that's something I noticed about myself. And that's enough fodder for now to, continue forward with wanting to develop this thing. But for the alignment experience, this thing that my friend Boomer and I put on last year, I knew I already enjoyed speaking. I had spoke at wedding videography retreats, podcasts, all those kinds of things. And so I was really excited to finally just speak about things of life that were important, finding fulfillment in life. And I went on for 2.5 hours. I've listened to it. Like, it was a long thing. Like, I can talk. I went on for 2.5 hours. I've listened back to it. Some parts have made me cringe, watching myself and whatnot. But my therapist was actually there. He was one of the speakers. I'm referencing him a lot in this episode, but he came up to me and he put his hands on my shoulders after right as I walked off the stage, where nobody could see me. And he's the first person that I saw. And I respect this man's words like my father's. And he put his hands on my shoulders and he said, "You have a gift." And it, if it wasn't for that, him saying that, I might have completely dropped the dream altogether, because I also got negative feedback that same day from people. I had 2 different people come up to me and say things to me about me speaking up there that actually crushed me amidst the fact that I did get that positive feedback from my therapist as I walked off. But sometimes in life, the negative things that people say can really stick with you forever. And they say that it's really easy to forget the positive things, but there's been something about when somebody speaks positively into a dream of yours or into your spiritual gift or whatever it might be, that also will stick with you. And I think that's a sign that, again, I'm not saying I'm good at speaking, but it's something that I enjoy doing, and it's something that's worth building that muscle more and more. And because I enjoy it, because somebody else has noticed that in me as well, and in spite of the fact that people have spoken negatively into it, I decide to continue forward. It's why I have a podcast to hone my on the spot speaking skills. You know what I mean? And so, have you ever had anybody speak negatively or into that? Obviously, we all have negative self-talk and things, but have you ever had somebody speak poorly on your writing or your speaking, or give feedback that was like, ouch,
yes,
that maybe wasn't constructive?
Yes. Yeah. There's times I speak at churches and schools occasionally. I haven't done as much, but most recently I've been more in the church sphere. And I've had, feedback. I'll get off the stage and people be like, "That just moved me," or "Lady in tears, that touched me." And I'm like, and then one person will, have a feedback. And this one guy, he meant so well, but he just gave a lot of feedback on the way I was holding the microphone and the way my voice sounded. And it was a little too booming. And I just remember I left that day, forgetting absolutely any positive feedback. And I was like, what the heck? Did everyone else think that? Did everyone else not hear what I said? And were they distracted by how I'm holding the microphone? That stuck with me for a while. And then my husband was like, "No, why do you care so much about that person's feedback? Yes, I respect them, but at the end of the day, whose voices do I really care about? Who's poured into my life? Who knows me? Yes, don't be ignorant to feedback. I think there's
for sure
good in that. Yes, and since he told me that, I will never hold the mic this way. I'm way more observant of it, But just whose voices do you respect? Some people don't even know you and they have feedback, and it's okay, cool. Water off, a duck's back. You gotta know where you're putting the value of someone's voice in your life. Because if you're taking everyone's voice and you're like letting it stick, like that's going to be really hard to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's kind of that whole North Star principle that we were talking about.
100%.
What's going to get you through the valley?
Mm-hmm.
It's this realization that you have a purpose here on earth, that you have something that gets you excited, and that's worth getting out of the valley for. And the same thing for what we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
What feedback are you going to listen to? How are you going to put aside the words of somebody that's negative and let that roll off of your back?
Yeah.
The only way to do that and not just get confuzzled in all of the words and the noise of A, what's happening in life, but B, what people are saying, is to have that North Star to look at. And the North Star is what gets you excited in life. And just knowing that this gets me excited. Yeah. If it gets you excited, you must continue to do it. Yeah. You have to continue to do it. Yep. Because like if you're not doing the thing that gets you excited in life, you're doing yourself a disservice, one that most likely later on in life you will look back and regret not doing. Mm-hmm. And of course we have, bringing it back to the 9 to 5, we have to pay the bills. Yep. We have obligations like mortgages, and that's something that's like fun. Recently getting married, realizing, you know, as a provider that's a lot of weight, you know, not being a single guy anymore. And so the whole topic, and I just keep going back to this 9 to 5 thing because I just know so many people. I've talked to so many people. I was talking to Lisa, my wife, before this about, you know, the excuses that people make for not going and doing the thing that is the North Star in their life, doing the thing that gets them excited, creating space to maybe figure out what that is, to start noticing the beauty in the mundane, because that begins to reveal, if you're not seeing a therapist or something, that begins to reveal what gets you excited in life, what is beautiful in life to you, and then starting to work off of that. And I feel like, gosh, if I was listening to this podcast right now, that would sound so hippie and annoying to me, but that's really like the answer. And not to say that I have figured out the answer to these things, but I know where the answer lies. And it's more of a matter of getting myself to do it. Most of the time, we don't. We know the good that we need to do. We know that we need to go to the gym and work out. We know what the results of going to the gym are going to be. Yep. How often do we go to the gym? Like, not as much as we would like. I'm not speaking for you, but you know, most people in general, like we just don't go and do that thing. And so the same with figuring out what we should be doing in life. When you sit down and create space and start noticing the mundane, or meditating or praying or whatever you do, it's going to feel hokey to you. It's not going to feel like it's doing anything. But over time, as you discipline yourself, it's not the one rep where you look in the mirror and like see like, I look amazing. It's the months of consistency. Yep. And it's just reminding myself to continue doing that, to find those things.
Well, like you said, it's a muscle. Like any muscle you're not using is going to atrophy. And sometimes you take a break from the talent. Sometimes you take a break from the gift, and that muscle does start to atrophy a little bit. And so to get back in the gym, right, you got to start with maybe less weight than you used before and build back up to where you were at. And then from that point, you continue to grow. But like anything, it's something you have to give some time and effort to.
For sure. Yeah. Going back to the muscle atrophying, muscle atrophy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a word. When we talked on the phone before this podcast, you mentioned that you've always loved writing and speaking, but during the COVID time, during everything else happening with your husband, that stuff obviously wasn't as much of a priority. It was a lot harder to jumpstart it, to keep it continuing going forward. And I guess the question I have for you is, does it feel like that muscle atrophied during that time? And maybe give us a little bit of a history of what this journey of writing has looked like for you.
Yeah, it definitely atrophied a bit. There was a season I went back to writing after COVID, and I would just stare at the screen on my Google Docs forever, and nothing would come to my brain. I would try to write a poem, I'd try to rhyme, and like nothing would sound good to me. Nothing. Yes, I was producing it, but nothing was striking my heart. Nothing was actually like, felt that, you know? It was just almost like going through the motions. And sometimes that is a part of re-engaging the muscle, is just going through the motions. You may not be like, yeah, I'm feeling this. This is, but like you just got to keep tapping into it.
Mood follows action.
So yes, exactly. So that is a huge thing for me. Just keep going. My history with writing. So I would say 10 years ago, the person I was then, you could not put a lid on me. Like you could not dampen me, I would do anything. Like I was just such a go-getter, such a self-starter. And in college, I published my journal writings. That was kind of the first real, like, here's my writings and I'm presenting them now to people. They're not just in my journal. I was so passionate about it. I started this group thing that I'd speak at and people would come, and it was just so cool. Like nothing could dampen me. And then, you know, life happens, COVID happened. I got married, you know, through that there's been some valleys and trials, and I just kind of stopped, you know, self-pity, whatever, like it's not looking like I want it to look, so screw it. I'm not going to keep doing it, you know? And then most recently, I've just been so convicted that you need to write again. Like you need to speak again, and you need to speak on what you've been through. Because there is a past you, there is a Hannah somewhere who is desperately looking for someone who can validate her experience or can speak to her situation. And so that kind of drives me, is like, who's the little me out there that needs somebody to speak into them? And so most recently, that's kind of been a driver for my writing and kind of where it's at right now.
That's a cool perspective to be thinking about, you know, because a lot of times they say like there's a big difference between passion and purpose. That passion is what gets you excited, and then your purpose is whenever what gets you excited you put back out into the world to impact other people. That's a purpose. You know, if I'm a wildlife photographer and I like going off and just taking pictures of polar bears, but I hang them up in my room, you know, that's passion, and that's great. But can you transfer your passion to purpose and, I don't know, take people on a guided tour to go and photograph polar bears, or, you know, go and speak and show kids in schools, those kinds of things? That's purpose. And so it seems like, although writing is your passion, you've also found purpose in it too, through writing to maybe that past version of yourself out there.
100%. I think the two have definitely found a home together, where before I would just kind of write, you know, on different things. Maybe I wasn't even, and this still happens, right? Where you write something you're not even dealing with, but it's just something you want to write about. But more recently, I am finding this merging of the two, of my hardships, what I've lived through, the suffering, is actually something I feel like I was born to, right now at least, to speak on, to write about. And that's kind of finding that purpose in pain as well. It's kind of come out of that.
Yeah, 100%. Bridging the gap between passion and purpose, I think, is vital. I think not keeping something to yourself is so important, because the passion is what you discover and the purpose is what brings the world and you life. Like, for example, I talked about how I like speaking. Maybe a derivative of that is I like talking to people. Sometimes I can forget that when I'm camping out in the valley, when I'm doom scrolling. But there can be little things that emotionally resonate with me. We talked about emotional dissonance, but there can be little things that are emotionally resonant with me. Like, for example, I still do wedding videography education, you know, and I still have a mentor call that I put on once a month. And sometimes it feels like a drag to put that together and do that, because that's not necessarily where I'm going anymore. But I find myself at the end of those calls, like I'll come upstairs and I am in a better mood than I've been in a while. And if I observe what is emotionally resonant with me, if I observe what is getting me excited as I go through life, and I guess I'm speaking to this because I just want people to find their passion in life and find what gets them excited. When I walk upstairs and I notice myself getting excited, I need to float myself back to why am I feeling good? And after doing it enough, I'm like, I enjoy investing into people. I love talking to people. I love offering something to this world, and wedding videography is something that I'm good at, and I can help people out with their journeys, and that, you know, I'm able to speak into people with their own businesses, and I feel good because I'm able to turn that passion, you know, what was once a passion, and it has purpose now. But really what I'm seeing from that too is that I also enjoy speaking and to people. And even like right now, if I'm going to be honest, Hannah, I've not had a good day today. Like 15 minutes before you walked in, like I was not doing too hot. But there was something in me, as I have observed myself go through, as I've observed those calls with these people in this wedding videography, I know that talking to people gives me life. And I knew that regardless of how I'm feeling then, that after this, taking the action of doing this podcast with you, because I enjoy talking to people, because I enjoy giving back to maybe one person out there that listens to this and is impacted by something that you say.
Yeah.
You know, that gives purpose to what I'm doing. It gets me excited and it makes me feel better. My mood follows the action of me putting together this whole monstrosity of a setup that nobody can see. You know,
It's incredible.
I gave you the better angle.
Thank you.
Part of my breakdown was how bad this angle looked before. I'm a videographer and this looks like dog ass. But no, I just want to speak in that a little bit more too. And again, a passion of mine is like breaking down things for people to maybe, if somebody can just leave this podcast and think about, hey, what gets you excited? That's emotional resonance. Just start to focus. You don't even have to sit there and answer it. Go through life and focus on the mundane in life and just observe.
Yeah.
Just watch yourself. Remove yourself from the thoughts that you're having and just watch yourself go through your life and see what drains you and what gives you life.
Yep.
And not to say don't do the things that drain you, because sometimes the things that drain you are paying the bills and you need to pay the bills. And that's something that I'm realizing. But I just wanted to speak into that. I don't know if you had any follow-up thoughts on that.
Yeah, 100%. Right. I know my personality type. I think in like certain jobs, they'll give you a test of like, you know, are you administrative? Are you a motivator? Like, what is your strong suits? And so I know at work even what drains me, what tasks are going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. But I do catch those little things that give me life, you know, speaking on relationship and, you know, speaking in general, like when I have to do a client call and I'm like, oh, call this client. But when I get on the phone and, you know, the conversation starts to go away from maybe the work stuff and more of a personal level, I'm like, oh, I love this. Like, I love talking to that person and getting to know them. And that is what also sets me on fire as well, is people and being inspired by people. And then that's the cycle, right? Of I'm inspired. Now I can write something or whatever. And so for whoever's listening and maybe you're at work, like what about even your work day, those small moments, like what kind of sets you on fire? What kind of made you smile? Or it could be the littlest thing, but follow that trail, you know, what depletes you? Okay, follow that trail. Like, why do I feel depleted by that? Is that something I maybe should press into more? Like, is that a challenge to me? Because life presents us opportunity all day long of what might inspire us or push us or propel us forward. So look at those little mundane moments and
Right. I was listening to a podcast. I might have told you this on the phone, between Jay Shetty, Mel Robbins, and they were talking about, you know, when you're in that situation at work, the vast majority of people in this world, they're not entrepreneurs. You're going off and they have a 9 to 5, they're working a job, and it can feel really draining. But how do you flip the script and not just say, ugh, like, you know, when I get home, maybe let's just say maybe they are aware of, the person listening is aware of their passion or something. You know, and they want to get home and do that, but that's building up resentment for their job. But they must maintain their job to exist as a human. They were talking about not letting that time go to waste, you know, like observing, using it to figure out what emotionally resonates with you. But you're also, life is, if you believe that there's anything else going on in this world is in regards to higher power or God, or there's being something in this world, you have to understand that every little thing that is going on in our life is a building block that's going to either be used under the adage suffering is grace, or is revealing something beautiful about ourselves. Or, you know, there's probably things that you did throughout your life that made you a better writer and made you more apt to speak into the younger version of yourself, somebody that's in a similar situation that you didn't necessarily enjoy in the moment. But over time, those things started to reveal that they were actually really important. And so not letting those 8 hours a day go to waste just because you are, you know, sitting at a computer desk doing the same thing over and over. What can you gain from that in order to go out back into the world and do what you really want to do? Because when I used to be an engineer, and I would sit at the desk and I was problem solving. I was doing things all the time. It's what the basis of any engineering field is, problem solving. That's what they told us in engineering. And I didn't like what I was doing. And regardless of the fact that I didn't like what I was doing, I learned after the fact that problem solving is something that I'm decently good at. And that whenever I went into wedding videography, the way that I taught people and the way I still teach people is how do you break down logically and problem solve the mystery of how to be good at wedding videography. And so it was problem solving. And now I bring into the education world. And honestly, throughout this podcast, it's like, hey, let's problem solve you not being able to figure out what your passion is going to be so that you can wake up like Hannah and write in the morning. Because some people are like shaking the bars on the prison cell of what their life feels like I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what this is. Yeah,
what I need to do, you know. And so that whole idea, and Jay Shetty's so well spoken. The way he said it, way better than me. But basically, don't let that time at work go to waste. You know.
Yeah, there's dead time. I think, you know, the American work situation, whatever. There's always dead time, right? Or okay, like I did the job, I sent the emails, like, and there's some dead space here. And so you've done your job. I would say capitalize on that instead of doom scrolling, which is what most people do, I feel like, at work, right? Everything's done, so they'll kind of start scrolling. And yes, we're all human. We need a mental break for a second. But don't use all that time to just kind of waste on that. Whatever your passion is, try to give even 10, 20 minutes of it, you know, attention to that. Same at work. I'll do that too, where I'll pull out my laptop and on one screen I have work and then on the other screen I have my Google Doc. That kind of always exists up because words are coming to you all day long.
100%. Yeah. All right. Well, going forward, I'm actually going to stop talking so much because you're the guest here. And I've just been getting excited talking about all these different things. But I want to take it back to what is it about? And I know you mentioned that words get you excited or that you notice that you enjoyed the power of words. Why do you enjoy speaking? Why do you enjoy writing? What is it about those that you notice that it's a passion of yours?
Yeah, to me, words are never neutral. They are either encouraging someone, they're speaking life into someone, or they're speaking death, right? There's power in the tongue. And so that has always stuck with me. And I love how words can move a room. I love how, you know, someone might be in the worst pit or the worst valley and they just hear a word of encouragement and it gets them through that day. It gets them through that whatever situation they're in. And I've seen that in my own life, like saying something to someone and then watching like the light come back on in their eyes, or they get something and they're like, oh yeah, like, okay, I can do that, you know, or that encouragement that just moves them. And I've seen it with my own eyes. Like I've seen the words I've said to someone, you know, light them up. And that fuels me of like, oh, hey, like, what is this thing in me? And like, how do I keep that up? And obviously it's not just me, it's God, like in me, you know? And so that is something that I'm so drawn to. Like, that's why I'm so drawn to words and speaking.
Yeah. You said that you published a book, right?
Yeah.
Was that self-published or
self-published? Yep.
How does that work? Self-publishing?
Oh, it's a process. It's an expensive process.
Oh, geez, tell me.
I would do it very differently next time. Let me tell you. Shout out to Amazon. That's where I think I might go the next route. I did a self-publisher. They were great. But again, very expensive, very time-consuming. Even after you like submit the project, there's so many steps, and I'm like, oh, this is so unnecessary. But the whole thing that I learned in that was complete something for your passion. Like, execute something, plan something you want to do, and complete it. Even if it's crappy, even if it's an ugly painting, just complete it and put it out there. You know, I think that is so many people do not move forward because they keep everything locked back. I have a friend who is incredible at music and beats, and I've heard them and they're phenomenal, but like they never get shown because there's always something else I could work on. There's always another sound I could improve on. And it's like, no, like you're your worst critic, right? Like, but put it out there because you could be inspiring someone. So that same thought with the self-publishing of like, I still find errors in the book that I wrote, but I'm so happy that it's out there. Like I completed it. And even this next book, like that fueled me for the next one of what I'm working on and writing is like, just put it out there because you don't know who's going to be moved by it or inspired by it. And half the time, the gifting, a friend told me, is not for you, it's for others. And even when you're not loving your work, someone else might be moved by it. So
yeah, I really like that. Yeah, the idea of, I really love that you self-published a book because that takes a lot of, I didn't even know this side of it, but the financial side of it, you said is expensive.
Yeah.
But a lot of people sit in that limbo of, you know, once I get all this done, once it's perfect, it takes a lot to jump that bridge, to bridge the gap to the other side and actually make it a real thing.
Yep.
Because a lot of people, they will trick themselves into thinking that they're taking action,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll go in and they'll tweak and they'll make things better and whatever it might be. But sometimes it is procrastination in disguise. Just because you're sitting there and doing something doesn't mean you're actually putting your passion out there into a purposeful, as we were talking about, way.
Yes.
And so a lot of it, as you were saying, is doing it. It's not for you. It's to put it out there into the world. So how would you say, and you kind of spoke on this a little bit, but how would you say to the person, to your friend that is musically inclined, that just tweaks and makes things better, and not to like dog on whoever that is. Obviously, they're a very talented person.
Talented, yeah.
But how do you get across that gap to actually doing the thing? Because there's so many people. I know a handful of people too that are writers that have books that they're working on that they just can't finish it.
Yep.
That they love doing it, but they can't finish it. Oh my gosh, they'd love to get it out there, but they just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to somebody that's in that same boat?
Sometimes you got to jump before you know you can fly, or build the plane as you're flying it. Like, you were our worst critic, right? And so you have to, I think, remove that, almost that self-doubter, that self-hater in your head. You got to shut him up. He may be still talking, but you got to shut him up, and you just got to take that leap, as cliche as that sounds. Same with when I post something sometimes. I haven't done this in a while, but I would read my writing over and over and be like, oh, this is garbage. Like, but no, you got to do it. Like, you just got to full send and hit share, hit post, and sometimes I'd put my phone down and be like, that was terrible. You should not have posted that. And I'll have the self-talk, but, just see what happens. And I'd always get comments and, like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Like, nothing is as bad as you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I just say, just take the leap, whatever small, if that's posting for you, if that's sharing it with a friend, if that's finally telling someone that you're passionate about this thing, just what is it? Share it in a small way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sometimes try not to go back to the same point over and over, but sometimes it helps build a thought idea throughout an episode. But this whole idea of the North Star, like what's going to push you through to get you to actually publish a book, to put that song out, to make the video, to start the business, whatever it might be. Well, you have to be aware of what your North Star is in life. Why are you here? Why are you pushing through the valley? Why aren't you camping out? Why aren't you listening to all the voices?
Yeah.
Why aren't you just listening to the voices that matter? Why are you not finishing right now? Do you have a North Star to actually push you over the edge to realize, hey, it's okay to build a plane while it's flying? Which funny analogy, because that never really would work in real life.
You're like, as an engineer, you're like, that's definitely not gonna work.
Right. I don't know if that would actually work, but anyway, it makes sense with the human journey too, because perfectionism is disguised procrastination.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people that they fumble over what they're doing. And do you feel like you have ever struggled with that though?
100%. Oh yeah. I am a recovered perfectionist.
A recovering perfectionist.
I'm not near as a perfectionist as I used to be, but I used to be so perfectionistic, and that bled into procrastination of I'll do that tomorrow. Oh, I got to keep working on it. I'll post it next month. I'll do that thing next week. I'll call that person. I just kept putting things off, and then a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you're like, I still haven't done that, So I don't know. I've gone through my own journey that's kind of ripped that perfectionist out of me. But if you are a perfectionist, if you are a procrastinator, and sometimes the best things come in the 11th hour, but if you are a perfectionist or procrastinator, what are you still trying to control? What about that art piece? What about yourself? Are you still got that controller on? And how do you maybe rip that out of you a little bit?
Yeah. It's interesting because that is such a relatable feeling of years going by and realizing that you actually haven't finished the thing. There's a Stoic philosopher, Seneca, and he says that, I could be butchering this too. I probably am. I'm going to. Let's go ahead and say I'm going to.
Okay.
But he says that it's not that life is short. It's that those that go through life don't use it to its fullest potential. That we let so much time go by that we could have been doing something that we know that we should have been doing that would have brought us life.
Yeah.
That would have brought life to this world. but we chose not to do it because of XYZ, because of the perfectionism, because of the self-talk, because of the valley. But life is actually adequately linked, you know? Yeah, I hear, a lot of elderly people that have lived a full life are like, it almost sounds like weird for them to say, but they're like, I'm ready to get out of here. And I'm like, that's such a foreign thought to me right now, And that's because I feel like I have so much left to do in this life. And I think going back to the whole idea of one audacious move, that audacity to maybe finish the project, to press publish, which is a much bigger process than just pressing publish, to publish a video maybe, or to put the song out there or make the, post on Instagram. That's such something people that can put off for so long. But if you just chose and realize that you had the power to do that now, that you could actually take that leap now and just push yourself out the plane that you're fixing, that would expedite so much of your life, that you're all of a sudden, bam, you're 6 months ahead because you didn't sit there and fumble over what you were doing. And now you're further down the road with where you wanted to go. And so I guess that leads into my next question of, where do you see yourself going? Like, what's the goal for Hannah? Is it to continue working the 9 to 5? Is it and balancing these things? Is that something that you want to maintain, or are you wanting to dive more into the creative things? What's your balance look like going forward?
I think, if I could write my own script, like, I would definitely love to have my passion and purpose of writing and speaking, and that be my bread and butter. But I feel like for the foreseeable future, if I had to predict kind of how my life is going, I would say I have to keep the 9 to 5 for now. But where I would like to see the passion projects go is to share my story more. And I don't know necessarily what that looks like. I've been thinking about writing more. I am working on a second book about kind of what I've lived through. And I've also thought about starting a TikTok or, all the things. But I still get in my head about things like that. And I've had friends be like, Hannah, you just gotta post it. Like, you just gotta do the thing. And I am this is a small step, right? But I am making drafts, or I am making a video. I'm not ready to post it yet, but even the small step of like just making the video and showing myself I can take that step has been huge for me. And I'm not as scared. The thought of posting is not as scary anymore. And so not caring what people think is not as scary anymore. So that's kind of where I'd like to take it. I do one-on-one coaching with some girls. I'd like to rewire kind of what I've done in that sphere, but I do love connecting with people, helping them. It's kind of the avenue I'd like to take it, as using my pain and purpose and, helping other people who've gone through similar things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I wanted to talk about on the podcast today. You coach some people. You've noticed that that's something that gives you life. The power of words. That's the basis of coaching. Is either guiding somebody to a truth of their own, or speaking into somebody positively, or giving them. Maybe I'll let you describe what exactly that means. You said it was life coach. Yeah. But you also, we talked about on the phone, you do something called 3 a.m. conversations, which is really funny because 1 a.m. club, I shifted the name away from 1 a.m. club just because one audacious move is a little bit easier to remember. Like, it's 3 English words rather than like it being an abbreviation for something. But 3 a.m. conversations, I would love to hear about that and what exactly a life coach is.
Yeah. So that life coaching kind of is 3 a.m. is the umbrella, which houses all of these things. So 3 a.m. conversations started, 2019, I think. The heart behind it is we have our most raw, vulnerable conversations at 3 a.m. Like, when you're having pillow talk, you're probably going to say things that you would never say at the kitchen table. And so the heart behind it is, how do we bring that vulnerability, that kind of messy conversation to our everyday life, which we're all human. Like, we all are going through stuff. We're all dealing with stuff. And I think so often we like pretend that we're not, or we pretend that life is cruising and we're great, when really we're all battling something. And so the heart behind it is, how do we, bring that vulnerability layer into our everyday life? And so under that umbrella, I wrote the first journal publishing book thing. I started the life coaching because I wanted to have an avenue that I could conversate. Is it the most favorite avenue that I wanted to start? No, but it was something. And so I've developed more of a love for it. And then under that, also speaking or offering speaking at high schools, which I had done a little bit before COVID, and then churches. And so the umbrella is there. The avenues it takes kind of is shifting. But that's the heart behind 3 a.m.
Yeah. And it's cool because, you know, you're obviously the very talented and motivated person. You describe yourself as a self-starter, and it's very evident because, I mean, you've written devotionals, you've written books, you've spoken at different, whether it's at church or at a high school, you're doing 3 a.m. conversations. You started that whole thing. You're talking about making TikTok videos. You have girls one-on-one coaching that you do. There's lots of different avenues that you can take in life. And I think the important thing, as I kind of look at the picture of you and get to know you better through this conversation, is that all of these little things are just their signpost for where you should be heading in life. And while maybe posting the TikTok video or launching the website of 3 a.m. Conversations isn't this like confetti flying out of the walls, like you did it, you reached the mountaintop, you did the thing, you know, it probably didn't feel that way when you finally got the book out there. It probably felt relieving to a certain extent, and like a little bit like ouch, like that also hurt financially too. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that all of these little things are just a breadcrumb along your trail of who you are as Hannah Miller, as you go through life, that you're building a foundation for this life that you feel called into. And so that we have obligations, you know, when I look at your life, we have obligations that are like the 9 to 5, where we have to make money in this world. And it sucks.
It does.
That we have to do that. It sucks that we have to do that. But it's important to give ourselves the time in the morning, you know, if that's your chronotype, to get up and do those things, because that is a breadcrumb that is making the book that is going to get you through. Was you self-published before COVID, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, get you through and know that you're capable and that you have a love for this and that you actually finished the damn thing. And then the stuff starts happening with your husband's stuff goes through with COVID. But you still have this fire inside you still have this North Star to continue forward. And so I think it's important to like look at all of these things too, just like bringing it full circle for the viewer as you start to find your passion, as you start to realize what that North Star might be, that like once you realize it, that's not it, you know. It's this continual thing that you go through in life of doing these little things, and sometimes they all seem random, but they're not. They're all just a piece of you, because the speaking is separate from 1 a.m. conversation or 3 a.m. conversation, 1 a.m. conversations. But it's not at the same time, because you're still speaking to people. And the writing is completely different than speaking, but it's not, you know, because you're still using words, and you're also doing that with life coaching, and you're also probably writing for that as well. And so it's like, there's this beautiful picture of who you are that is forming more and more that you go through life, and that you create space for that. You know, is that something that you see and feel as you go through life? Yeah,
I think, you know, when I was younger, I would get fixed on like, well, this is the avenue. It has to be this lane, you know. And as I get older, I'm like, no, it actually can be multiple lanes. And we might spend a few months on this road. We might spend a few years in this road, like, but they all converge to the same place. And so, not letting my mind get fixed on like, this is the only way I can show this gift, or this is the only way I can show this talent, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of avenues that you can take, and by trial and error, right? You may learn like, oh, I don't like that avenue, or I don't like that road. That's okay. But what roads did you like? And it may take multiple failures or multiple mistakes to realize kind of where your bread and butter is. And to your North Star point, sometimes it's cloudy and you can't see the star, you know? But the star did not disappear. The star did not go away. The star still exists. You just can't see it. It's covered up. The same way when the mountains are covered, you know, they're not gone. They're still there. And west is still west. And so that thought of, there are times I do feel purposeless, you know, or I have felt that feeling of like, what the heck is the point of it all? But just remembering, like, again, it's not always going to be this way. Like, the clouds will part eventually. And they do part. And so that star is always there.
Yeah. Maybe I'll name this episode like the North Star.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I do love stars.
Yeah. One of my last questions for you, Hannah, is, you know, when you think about the word audacity, the dictionary definition of it is a willingness to take a bold risk. Sometimes audacity is looked at in the negative, like they had the audacity to say this to me. You know what I mean? But it's actually a really beautiful thing. It is courage. But in your own words, like how would you describe audacity, and how would you describe what that looks like going forward for you? What does it mean for you as Hannah Miller to be audacious?
Audacity to me is, like you said, like that bold move. What is that thing that scares me that if it went wrong, it would affect my pride a little bit? Like that to me is making that audacious move in my life. What's out of my comfort zone. Going forward, definitely I would say it's sharing my story, sharing what my husband and I have lived through the last couple of years, because a few reasons. One, it's embarrassing at times. It's yucky at times. It's messy. There's the thought, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to think about my husband? What are people, like all those thoughts. But at the end of the day, like you have to let the fears, the thoughts of others go to make the move. Like if you're always worried about, well, what are people going to think if I make the jump? Like they're going to think what they want to think, but you have to still take the leap. And so for me, and I'm getting to that space. It's been a process. The audacious move has been more of an audacious slow-mo step.
Yeah.
But I'm getting to that space of, okay, people will think what they're going to think, but you got to share the story because somebody's waiting on you, to take a step.
Yeah. And for you, that is, you're talking about sharing this more, even though it might be embarrassing or vulnerable.
Yeah.
For you, that is, you're writing a book on this right now, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So going through kind of the story we've lived through with addiction, recovery, mental health, all the stuff, and kind of backtracking to what I felt in that space. How did I get through it? What are some of the emotions that arise when we're going through tough stuff? And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm still kind of reconfiguring some of the things I want to write about, but just sharing the basis of the story. Even a healing thing for me was writing down the last couple of years, just writing out what has happened in my life. It's almost this reality of like, whoa, you lived through that. Like you made it through that, and it's like, it's healing in a way. It's like you're looking back and like, wow, you did it, or so to whoever's out there and you're like, I'm scared to take the move, make the move, like you never know who you're going to inspire to keep going.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's obvious that, and I can be one of the people too, saying that you are a good speaker. Before you even came on, Lisa told me the same thing. She's like, oh my gosh, Hannah would be great. I
love Lisa.
An excellent speaker. It's going to be really cool to see you continue forward amidst whatever emotion, inner voice, self-talk is going on about finishing this book, and to see the people that have gone through that or will go through that or are in something similar be impacted by that. And it's going to be really cool to see your purpose unfold even more as you keep putting your passion out into this world. Even whenever your passion starts to get into the mix with things that you've suffered through, things that aren't easy. It's life is messy, life is hard, and it actually sometimes is interesting to watch our passion intertwine with the things that suck in life. And that is just another part of the clue, the mystery of life that continues to unfold as our story continues to unfold. But it's about not camping out. It's about continuing forward.
And take the encouragements along the way. Like there's been times I've started to write and I'm like, oh, this is stupid, you should stop. But then I'll get a DM from a friend who I haven't talked to in a while, and they're like, hey, my boyfriend's going through this similar situation. What would I do? What should I do? And I'm just reminded of like, oh, okay, there was purpose in that pain. There was purpose in that. Like, keep going, keep writing it, keep saying it.
Yeah. Well, I hope you do. I hope you do continue forward. Hannah, thanks so much for making time for this today. This helped me out so much. Like I was talking about having this conversation today. Ask Lisa. I was in a very odd mood before this, and this is just it's a revelation for me, watching myself get excited, that I want to do more of this too. And so thank you for being gracious with your time and coming and letting people in that have been through something that you've been through or are currently going through it, that are similar to you or different, because we hit on a lot of different things. So just thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I think you're incredible. I'm always like just enamored at who you are and what you do. I know we don't know each other that super well, but I've observed your life and I am always inspired by what I see.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.